All right, so now we're going to find a max or min of a quadratic. Number one, we do not have a graph like we did, which is nice, but we have an equation. But the problem here is it's not in vertex form, because again, what I just showed you with graphing is that if you have it in vertex form, you can pick up all that information without even graphing it. So now to get it into vertex form, I'm going to have to complete the square, what we did this morning. All right, so again, I have y equals x squared plus 9x minus 5. And what I'm going to find out is whether this equation has a max or min, what that max or min is, and where it happens. All right, so again, I'm going to complete the square. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my x squared plus my 9x in brackets. I got to find my magic number because I'm telling you already, it is not minus 5. All right, and so I take half of 9 and I square it. Well, half of 9 is 4.5. All right, and then I square 4.5. So 4.5 times 4.5. Turns out the number I need is a decimal, which can happen. So that decimal is 20.25. All right, and again, I can't just add in 20.25. I got a minus 20.25. All right, so that is the number I need. So now I've completed the square, so I have y equals. I'm going to rewrite it as a binomial squared here. All right, so I'm going to have an x here. And again, to figure out what goes in the brackets here, I take half of my number that's in front of the x, so I have a positive 9, so half of that number is 4.5. Positive 4.5. I figure out the leftover amount. And so I have a minus 20.25 minus 5. Well, that's minus 25.25. Now, that thing is in vertex form. So again, I want to be able to complete my sentence that there is a blank of blank when x equals blank. All right, so again, filling in the blanks by just being able to look at my equation. Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is my a value, which some of you say, hey, there isn't an a. Well, there is. There's a secret 1 there. Now, I don't care what the number is, but here's the important part. It's whether it's positive or negative. This is a positive 1. That means our steps for a quadratic, if we graphed it, are opening up, which means this has a min, because the parabola opens up, which means the vertex is at the bottom. Now, what is that max or min? Here's the best part, is that the max or the min is always corresponds to your y value, the height. Well, the height is on the outside. Y's are on the outside. The x values are on the inside. And so the minimum is this value right here, which is that negative 25.25. When x is equal to, now again, this always gets tricks people up with quadratics. Again, always looks the opposite, because there's supposed to be a minus sign there if our h is positive. This time it is plus, so that means our x value is actually negative 4.5. So again, I was able to find all this information just by looking at the equation. All right, by completing the square first, obviously. All right, so I'm going to try another one of those. Let's see here. Example number 2, where I'm going to find the max or min of, let's see here, y equals negative 2x squared plus 16x plus 4. All right, so again, the first thing I need to do is, this one's different again because there's not a 1 in front of the x squared. So this is the tougher completing the square. We have those 2 extra steps, taking a factor out and then putting it back in. And so I'm going to factor out this negative 2. Let's use a different color here so we don't mess things up. So we have y equals factoring out the negative 2, which means, again, dividing every single term by negative 2. All right, so negative 2x squared divided by negative 2. Well, that's just x squared. Negative 16x divided by negative 2. Negative 16 divided by negative 2 is a negative 8, and this is my x term. And again, 4 divided by negative 2 is -2. All right. So now I've taken the -2 out. Now I'm going to complete the square just like we did earlier today. All right, so that means I'm going to put my x squared minus 8x. That's going to be in my round brackets. All right, I need my magic number here, and then I got this -2 over here. All right, so here we go. My magic number that I need here, again, I look at my -8, the number in front of x. I cut it in half, which is -4, and then I square it. Take -4 and square it. -4 times -4 gives you a positive 16. Again, balance it out here. I got to throw in a -16 here. All right. So now I can rewrite it because I've got the number I needed. And so I got y equals -2 times, let's see here. So I got my round brackets with squared. So again, the pattern, I have an x here. The number I put in my round brackets, again, I look at that number in front of x, which is -8. So I take half of -8 minus 4. And then I got my leftover stuff there. I got a -16 and a -2. So I lose 16, I lose 2, I'm down 18. All right, so then the square has been completed. I just have to put the -2 back now. So when I took it out, I divided everything by -2. When I put it back, I multiplied everything by -2. All right, so -2 times that whole thing, and then -2 times -18. Well, -2 times this whole thing is -2 times that whole thing. And then -2 times -18, negative times a negative, gives you a positive. All right, so I've completed the square. So now I can complete my sentence, right? Where I have, there is a blank when x equals blank. Time to fill in the blanks. All right. So again, I look at my a value. That is determining whether this thing's a max or a min. This a value is negative, which means my steps are going to be negative, which means my parabola is opening down, which means the vertex is at the top. So we have a max. Well, how high is it? Again, that's talking about how high or low. That's your y values. That's on the outside. So that's a 36. And where does it happen? Again, I look at my x value, which is inside the brackets. Again, tricks you up. Always looks the opposite. So it says x minus 4 in there, which means our x value actually is 4. And so there I answered 3 questions all in one simple little sentence. There is a max of 36 when x equals 4. Tells me, do we have a max or min? What is it? And where does it happen? All right, let's try a couple more of those. Again, you have to be able to complete the square or you cannot find the max or min. All right, so same idea for example number 3, where we're looking at finding the max or the min of y equals 3x squared minus 9x plus 14. There we go. So again, it's in standard form, so I'm going to have to complete the square to get into vertex form, because when you have a vertex form, you can spot out all the information. But again, I have a number other than 1 in front of my x squareds, and so I have to factor out that 3. All right, so again, that means divide every single term by 3. Well, 3x squared divided by 3 is just x squared. All right, negative 9x divided by 3. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3, and this is our x term here we're talking about. And then 14 divided by 3. That's got to be a decimal. And in fact, it is, I don't have my calculator here. 14 divided by 3, 4.67. All right. All right, so now it's time to complete the square. All right, so I got y equals 3 in brackets, because I'm round brackets here. I got my x squared minus 3x. My magic number, I'm banking that it's not going to be 4.67, so we'll put that over here. That's 4.67 over here. All right. Now, I do have to find my magic number that I need. All right, so again, I take half of my negative 3 here, cut it in half, so that's negative 1.5, and then I square it. So I'm going to have negative 1.5 times negative 1.5. Negative times negative gives you positive, and it's going to be positive 2.25. Again, balancing it out, I have a minus 2.25 outside the round brackets. All right, let's see here now that I've got my magic number here, so I'm just going to rewrite it. So I got 3. All right, so then I've got my round brackets squared. I've got this leftover stuff, so I'll have to figure that part out. All right, and again, the pattern is I put an x here, half of your b value or half of your number in front of x, so half of negative 3, got to watch your signs. Half of negative 3 is minus 1.5. All right, and then I got my leftover spot. So I got some decimals here. Let's see here. Negative 2.25 plus 4.67. I get positive 2.42. So yeah, you can have decimals in here. Makes it a little, it's the same process, but it makes it look harder, but it's not. All right, so now I've completed the square. Now I got to put the 3 back in. So 3 times this whole thing. So we get 3 times that whole thing. And then 3 times 2.42. 3 times 2.42 is, I got 7.26. All right, so now the square has been completed. So now I go and finish off my sentence here. There is a blank when x equals blank. Whoa, throw another blank in there. All right, so I get all the information's there. You just have to be able to find it. Well, first you got to be able to complete the square. I mentioned that this morning. But then you got to be able to find it. It's all there. So again, I look at my a value. It's a positive number. Again, don't care. Just want to know what the sign is. Don't care what the number is. It's positive. This means this parabola opens down or opens up. Sorry, steps are positive. It opens up. Means we have a vertex at the bottom, which means there is a min. Again, how high or low? The y values are on the outside here. So it's has a min of 7.26. When my x value, right there, we have, again, the negative sign is supposed to be there, so the x is actually positive, where the x is equal to 1.5. All right, one more. Little word problem this time. Always got to have a word problem thrown in there. Another flying squirrel. So we are going to get more and more word problems and how we actually use this stuff. All right, so example 2. That was all example, well, I guess example 2 or 4, whatever. This is all about a flying squirrel. It says, if the flight of a flying squirrel is given by the equation h is equal to negative 0.5 x squared plus 6x minus 10. All right, where x is the time in seconds and h is the height in meters. And it says, find the maximum height of the squirrel and when that occurs, what time it occurs at. All right, so if I'm looking for a max or min, I got to complete the square. I got to have it in vertex form. So I'm going to take my equation and I'm going to put it in vertex form because, again, right now it's in standard form. And again, I look in front of my x squared value, and it's not a 1, so I'm going to have to factor that negative at 0.5. Now, so I have h is equal to negative 0.5, square bracket. I divide every single term by negative 0.5. So negative 0.5x squared divided by negative 0.5. I'm just going to get my x squared. Now, when you're dividing by a number less than 1, your numbers when you divide are actually going to get bigger. All right, so if I take 6x and if I divide it by negative 0.5, first of all, I have a positive divided by a negative, so it's going to be negative. I end up getting 6 divided by negative 0.5, negative 12x. If I take negative 10 and I divided it by negative 0.5, a negative divided by a negative is going to give me a positive, and in fact, negative 10 divided by negative 0.5 is positive 20. There we go. So again, because my a value is less than 1, your numbers get bigger when you divide. But now I've got it, so now I can complete the square. So I have h equals negative 0.5. Again, because I'm completing the square, I'm going to put the x squared minus 12x in round brackets. 20 is not going to be my magic number. All right. So to complete the square, again, I've got to find my magic number here. I look at the number in front of x. It's negative 12. So I cut that in half. I get negative 6. And then I square it. So I take negative 6 times negative 6, positive 36. Again, balance it out. There's my minus 36. All right. So we've done, we got our magic number. So now I'm just going to rewrite this. So I get negative 0.5. And now, because I've got my magic number, I can write it as a binomial square, it's proper math language, where I have an x here. And again, the number that goes in here is half of your number in front of x. So half of negative 12 is a minus 6. All right. I have my leftover stuff. Minus 36 plus 20. I lose 36, but I get 20 back. I'm down 16. Okay. Again, I've completed the square. Time to put the negative 0.5 back. So I'm going to take negative 0.5 and times it by that big thing, which is just that. There we go. And then negative 0.5 times negative 16. Again, a negative times a negative is going to give us a positive number. And we're going to get a positive of 8, I believe, by taking negative 0.5 times negative 16. And now, because I've completed the square, I can answer the question as long as I know what I'm looking for, right? So the squirrel, because this is a word problem again, you always have to write therefore statements for word problems. All right, so the squirrel has a max height of, now is that even right? Yeah, it is. Look at our a value. They were right when they asked for max height because the a value is negative, which means our parabola opens down, means the vertex is at the top. Okay, so that's, they already told us that, but the squirrel has a max height of a certain amount blank meters after blank seconds. So again, the information's there. You just got to know where to find it. And again, by looking at my equation, vertex form. Height, that means the height is on the outside. So the maximum height is 8 meters. Not bad for a flying squirrel. And how long did that take for it to get in flight to get to a max height? X is our time in this situation, in this question. So there's my time number right inside those round brackets. And again, it always looks the opposite. And so after 6 seconds, that's when our squirrel will have a maximum height. So again, looking at completing the square to get it into vertex form, because once you get it in vertex form, you can find the max or min of a quadratic equation, which is a benefit of our equations being in vertex form, because when it's in standard form, it's a very, very long process. Can be done in standard form, but this, believe it or not, is much easier. If you can complete the square, you can find the max or mins, because again, the a value, depending on whether it's positive or negative, will tell you whether this equation's got a max or min, and then all the rest of the information of how much your max or min is, and when it happens are all located in the equation. All right, so